Hey family, welcome to another episode of True Tuesday. NewB Nation, what's up? I'm so glad that you decided to join us on today. True Tuesday, I want to remind you, is a platform simply to bridge the gap between generations. It's also a place where we can ask why millennials and Gen Z really don't like coming to church. But most importantly, this is a platform where we want to encourage and remind everyone that Jesus Christ wants a relationship with all of us. Period. So I want to just go ahead and emphasize today's True Tuesday episode is going to be a little different. Our nation, our community, our church family, we're heavy right now. So we need to go ahead and touch the issues and begin to bridge the gap and talk about what's heavy on our hearts. I have three dynamic African-American males that are going to be with me today, helping me facilitate and just have a discussion about what's been going on. First guest, we have Mr. Tim here. What's up? He said, yo. So we have Tim, and he's going to be just kind of helping me talk about our questions to God and like how we respond to what's been going on. So if we could, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So February 23rd, Ahmaud Arbery, killed, shot, modern day lynching. April, Breanne Leath, responding, doing her job, was gunned down as a result of a domestic violence pursuit. God, we have questions. She did what she needed to do, right? Get in the system, begin to affect change, but she was still killed. Naya, last Sunday I woke up to news of a 16-year-old being murdered as a result of simply being in the car with her mom. People were congregating when they were supposed to be at home. She did what she was supposed to do. She was with her mom. It's past Wednesday. Drajon Reed, Facebook Live, gunned down by police, shot multiple times. God, we have questions. And honestly, our community is hurting, angry, broken. What do we do next? I want to simply talk about today in Ephesians 4, starting at verse 26, Message translation. Ephesians 4, 26 and 27. Go ahead and be angry. You do well to be angry, but don't use your anger as fuel for revenge. And don't stay angry. Don't go to bed angry. Don't give the devil that kind of foothold on your life. So today, we just want to talk from the subject of be angry, sin not. My question is, God, a lot of us were frustrated because we feel like we've been doing what we're supposed to do in society. We feel like we're supposed to doing what we're supposed to do in our job to honor our parents. But then there's still some times where things don't turn out the way we feel like they're supposed to turn out. I can remember as a child, having to learn the ability to code switch. So oftentimes my emotions had to be masked and I couldn't really express what I was feeling because even in church I was taught, oh, give praise and always be joyful and be thankful. There's always something worse. So I felt like I had to stifle my emotions. I can remember being labeled as the sensitive child or the passionate child. So soon I became numb. And I felt like if I become angry or if I show emotion, then that's a sign of weakness. Oftentimes our culture is taught not to show emotion. And Tim, you about to get mad at me real quick because even as we were talking before the segment, I wanted us to talk about something and you said, I don't know if I want to talk about that because I don't want to cry. And the scary thing is, I feel like we're often taught that we can't be angry, we can't cry, we can't show emotion, and especially as a black male, you're taught at a young age, I'm sure you've been told, man, quit acting like a girl. Have you ever been told that? Mm-hmm. And did that make you upset? Yes. Because simply what? Your feelings was just hurt. Yeah. One thing I want us all to understand that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have emotion. But the problem is, what do we do with that emotion? Here in Ephesians, Paul, he's writing, and it's ironically, he's writing from jail. And he's telling people what to do with their emotion. He's telling people to become more mature in Christ. And he says, don't use your anger as fuel for revenge. Recently, I've seen a lot of things on Facebook Live. I've seen people protesting. I've seen people expressing their anger and saying things like, we about to go tear it up, or just the idea of tearing something down in order to release the frustration that they feel like they're feeling. And as I read Ephesians 4, I had to be honest, and I realized that Paul, he's talking to the church. I'm sure you have a lot of friends that have expressed certain things and you're like, man, bro, like, really, maybe you shouldn't do that. But then at the same time, you have to realize that some of our friends are unchurched. So how do we respond to those people who are hurting and frustrated, who don't know God? A lot of us, we have this verse to hang on to, be angry but sin not. What does that mean? Because God, I've been angry for a while, but how do I get to a place where there's some relief? And then I need us to understand, it says, don't give the devil a foothold, that kind of foothold in your life. What I need us to understand is that when we continue to operate in a level of anger and we don't appropriately release our emotion or handle our emotion with a level of maturity, that gives us we're almost like tools and pawns to the devil, because we're just doing what he wants us to do. It's like, man, okay, we're going to tear it up. Let's do whatever. Instead of just sitting back and using some wisdom and saying, okay, I can be angry, but I don't need to respond the same way that everyone else responds. So Tim, like being a young person, knowing what's going on, first, I guess my first question to you is like, seeing what happened on Wednesday and seeing Facebook Live and seeing a young man being gunned down by the police, how are you feeling right now?
Kind of scared, because you never, like, you get pulled over by a cop. You know, as a black man, you never know, like, what's gonna happen next. They could shoot you, they could not. So I'm just scared.
You're scared. So like, does your family, do y'all have conversations about what to do if you get pulled over?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's like do whatever the cop tell you. Let the police see wherever your hands are. Don't let them like put them down or nothing, because they're gonna get nervous.
That's cool. And I mean, it's different, even us having this conversation, I think it's just kind of different seeing you in this light, because normally, you know, when we upstairs in NewB Nation, I joke with you and I'm like, you my clown, you know what I'm saying? Because you like always, like you're joking. And I think, do you feel like you're judged before people really know who you are?
Like most of the times I be happy, but then like, it's like a change. Like in public, I'm like happy and goofy. Like in private, it's not the same.
Yeah. So in private, like, what are you like? Where's your heart at in private?
It's like nowhere, like I'm like in the black dark room, like type feeling.
Wow. So when you feel like you're in the black dark room type feeling, what do you do? How do you like come out of that? Or like, do you feel like you're numb? Do you feel like, man, it's just like so much going on? Or do you just kind of
Like,
sit in that?
So much going on. Like,
yeah. So I've seen like on multiple Sundays, you and your mom, like, and brother, like, go to the altar and pray. And then like you come upstairs to NewB Nation. And I think that's really dope, because I feel like for the families to be able to practice prayer and everything like that. So what do you feel like your relationship with God is like? Have you been asking God questions like, God, why is this happening to our country? So in your prayer time, what does that look like?
I just ask God to just like have a good week, make my mom proud, make my grandma proud, make my auntie proud. Yeah.
So with your friends, are you able to speak truth to them? Like if your friends are going down like a wrong path and you feel like they're doing something wrong, do you feel an apprehension? Do you speak up, or do you feel apprehensive like, oh, I don't want to be lame and tell them like, nah, bro, you shouldn't do this?
We all speak up for like each other. So say somebody down and somebody else will come pick them up. I'm down, he'll come pick me up.
Okay. That's dope. That's dope. So in your emotion and in dealing with your anger, have you ever been angry with God?
Yes. When he had took my grandma away, it was just like kind of in her sleep type takeaway. So I was spending the night over her house. I was like, why did it have to be that night?
Yeah. So what did you do with that anger? Like, do you feel like you've come back to a place where you actually can talk to God?
Yes, cause like life keeps going on, but at the same time, my grandma's still gone. So only way I can overcome that my grandma's gone is by doing better in life.
Heard that. Heard that. Is there anything that you would say to your peers right now during this season who either one might have seen the live, who are just frustrated with things that's going on with the COVID-19 and possibly losing loved ones, and just what's going on in our community in general? Is there anything that you would say to them to either encourage them or give them some words of wisdom?
Like the world is a hard place, but you can't make nobody else happy. You can't make everybody happy. You can only make yourself happy or your mom happy. So I think of it as long as my mama happy, my dad happy, I'm good. I don't want to make nobody else happy.
Okay.
Except for God.
Yeah, I was about to say, hold on. You said nobody else. I was like, you got to add yourself in there too. So make sure yourself, God, and your parents. So basically, essentially, you're saying, man, make sure you're abiding by your parents' rules and pleasing God in this season and doing purpose.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else, man? Tim, you all solemn and stuff. I'm like, clown. You said, hold on, I'm trying to be serious. I'm trying to be serious.
I was trying to be serious. I didn't want to know if you want the goofy side.
No, I want Tim. Like, why would I not want anything but Tim? There you go.
Can I introduce you want me to introduce myself?
You still want to introduce? Go ahead and introduce yourself, Tim.
I'm playing. I'm Tim. I come to New Beginning.
Yeah.
I attend Lawrence Central, and I play basketball. I get buckets for shout me out.
I love you, man. But no, I thank you for joining me, and I appreciate your insight. And I'm really proud of what you're doing in this season, even in us talking yesterday and just reaching out to your teachers, making sure that your grades are okay, and just abiding by what your mom is asking you to do, and just your ability to process and know that this season is not forever and that prayer changes things. So I appreciate your insight, man. Thank you. Love you.
Love you too.
Here I have with me Mr. Stephen Gross, mental health counselor and therapist, just here to talk about some of our emotions, frustrations, secondhand trauma, and how we deal with that right now in view of recent events. So basically kind of what's been going on in the community, what's been going on in our nation, even thinking about COVID-19, being in isolation. Like, how are you feeling right now? What's going on with you in your heart?
It's a lot going on. I mean, I think, like you said, it's troubling times, in terms of our health, which is affecting our mental health. A lot going on in the country right now. So I think it's just, it's hugely important that we're just taking care of ourselves, and whatever that means for you, because that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So right now I'm just trying to, maintain, trying to keep my family safe, trying to keep my friends safe, loved ones safe. From a mental health perspective, from a physical perspective, from a community perspective. It's just trying to, make sure people are doing what they need to do to take care of themselves.
Okay, that sounds awesome. So right now, a lot of people are angry, frustrated, really not knowing what to do with their anger and their rage. So my question is, what are some coping skills or healthy, positive coping skills that we can do with our anger and our rage? I know at one point when I would become angry, I would punch walls, moment of transparency. And my friend would be like, why are you hurting yourself? And you're not affecting change. You're just more or less imploding and hurting yourself. So how can we deal with the anger and the rage that's beginning to bottle up as a result of the things that we are saying?
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, it's a pretty loaded question.
Okay.
Because I mean, I think you know, and just using your example of hitting stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad, you know, coping skill, maybe punching the walls. You know, you know, changing, you know, what you're going after with, you know, maybe a pillow or something like that. But I think it's more about letting that frustration out and venting it. Because a lot of times, if you hold it in, eventually that implosion is going to happen in some way, shape, or form. Whether you snapping off of somebody or you're in the middle of, you know, shopping and something happens and then you just explode on everybody to the point that you don't even understand where it's coming from. I mean, I think that's a lot of times what happens with our anger, especially when we don't find appropriate ways to let it out. It comes out in some inappropriate form, in some inappropriate situation that a lot of times we can't even connect the dots to. And that happens a lot of times even with clients that I'm working with, is trying to understand where that is coming from. So, you know, given the current situation with everything that's happening in the community, then coupled with the fact that we're all bottled up, you know, there's not a lot of opportunity to go outside, to kick it with our people, to have that social interaction. So a lot more of those frustrations are being bottled up. And so I usually just tell people, just for, you know, friends and family, is that we got to take advantage of the little things that we can do, even if it's just walking around the block, getting some sunlight. You know, that vitamin D from the sun is super helpful. Like, people don't even recognize how much impactful just being in the sunlight can have, you know, on our bodies and on our minds. So doing those little things, talk to people. One thing we do is we don't like to talk, and maybe, you know, at people that look like me, but a lot of times it's generally speaking, but particularly for black folks, we feel like, man, you know, it ain't cool to just be letting people know how I'm feeling, or I ain't got time to let people know my problems, or people gonna feel like, man, I don't want to hear your problems. I got my own problems. So you deal with your own stuff. But that stuff is hugely important, like you saying, and, you know, in the example of punching something, words can be just as powerful and just as impactful. So we got to let people know what's going on with us. If you feeling frustrated, then let somebody know you feeling frustrated and have that conversation. Because in these times, we all frustrated, we all mad. And so this can be opportunities for us to just check in with each other. Hey sis, how you doing? Well, you know, bro, I'm glad you asked. I'm feeling like this. I'm feeling that way too. So, you know, next thing you know, we done had a 10-15 minute conversation and we've gotten stuff off our chest that it may not make our anger go away, because, you know, it's always kind of being imposed out there. We see it on TV. We turn on the news. It's happening in our neighborhoods. It's happening to our friends and cousins and loved ones. But having that opportunity to just kind of talk it out can do wonders, even in that moment, until we can figure out then what we want our strategy to be, so that that anger doesn't get lost and we're not just out there just, you know, flying off the handle willy-nilly with no kind of outcome. So then talking it out and then figuring out what my next move is.
Okay. So, you know, the verse we're focusing on for this session is, you know, basically essentially be angry but sin not. So I guess, do you feel like it's okay to be angry? Do you feel like in certain areas that you've had to like code switch, or you know, feel like that you're, you know, your counterpart might be viewed as angry or passionate, but then you're the angry black man? How do you deal with those type of situations?
Yeah. And I mean, that's pretty interesting, because I'm always the angry black man. You know,
Well,
I mean, you know, I think about I'm a big movie buff, and so lately one of the things I've been doing is kind of going back and watching like all the Marvel movies in order. But one thing Hulk said in one of the movies, they asked him, you know, how do you control your rage and your anger and going between Bruce Banner and Hulk? He said, well, I'm always angry. That's how I control it, is that I'm always angry. And to me, what that really means is that, one, I think, to sort of answer your question, I think it's absolutely okay to be angry. It's a natural emotion, and even God got angry. So I mean, now vengeance is the Lord. So absolutely. You know, there's certain actions that we can take with our anger that we can't do, you know, what he do. That's not our role.
Preach.
But the anger, the anger is natural though. The anger is natural. So I think it's absolutely okay to be angry. I mean, if you honestly, some of the stuff, if you're not angry, it's almost like, what is wrong with you? Yes. There's something else going on. So when I'm thinking, you know, from a mental health perspective, there's some other things that we probably need to address, because some of those reactions are normal. And so I think it's okay for people to be angry, but it's what you do with that anger that is going to make the biggest impact on you, and probably your family and community and things like that. So I'm a person where, like I said, if I'm always angry, to me that helps me to stay in control, because now I have to think about when I let my anger out, when I let it show, how much do I let other people know how angry I am? Because I'm always kind of, walking around like this, and not in a bad way. I think, I'm kind of a history buff too, and so it's, to know these things and to know what's going on and know the correlation of, the systems at play and all of these other factors, is it should make you angry, and to know this stuff will make you angry. So now I use that to kind of determine, what do I want my next move to be? How do I vent this anger into something positive and productive to get something done, so that maybe I'm angry, but the person behind me, or the person sitting next to me, or the person who's gonna be involved in whatever situation don't have to be angry because I used it positively and constructively to adjust something.
So more or less, I think this is probably my last question for you. Recently, a lot of our youth, and thank you so much for working on the NewB Nation team with us, they witnessed a young man be shot on Facebook Live, and they literally were watching. And for me, I know that secondhand trauma is real. A lot of conversations have been going on, and they've been saying that, well, it wasn't you, you're not directly connected, all this other stuff, and it's almost like frustrating. And I feel like a lot of our young people feel like, they can't feel, or because it wasn't directly them. And even though they might have known Jay Shine, or known even some of the people connected to that, they feel like they can't feel it. Secondhand trauma, is this a real thing? How do we process this? How do we get help? Is it okay to feel?
Yeah, secondhand trauma is definitely real. A lot of times we term it vicarious trauma, which basically means that, something that someone's going through that's really close to you or something like that, you actually feel that you're impacted by that. And we got to think of the images that are put out on the media. We see things constantly over and over and over again. We've seen it with COVID. Every time you turn on the news, everything for the 29 or the 30 minutes of the news is all about this subject. When something like this happens, it gets plastered over social media and media and things like that, and it re-traumatizes us. So, in the mental health world, we have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I've been, kind of looking at some videos and doing some reads and stuff like that, and especially for people in the Black community, PTSD can be post-traumatic slave disorder. So basically what that means is that all of the things that we've been going through, we continue to go through it. Our grandparents went through it, their grandparents went through it, their grandparents went through it. So you're talking about generations and generations and generations going through police brutality, going through trying to fight the government for assistance or housing or all these other things. And so there's never been times where we had moments to just kind of stop and decompose and have opportunities to vent about this, because as soon as something happens, something else happens. And like you were saying, in the last 4 weeks, it's been boom, 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 boom. And then you got COVID on top of all of that. And so that secondhand trauma is real, and we're always living that, and we're always in tune. We're always on edge. We're always trying to watch our backs, to look behind the corner. What happens with the police? And then I'm worried about the homeboys on the other block. And I'm worried about my mom being on my head. And I'm worried about my friends. And I'm worried about the school teachers. It's always stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff. And we don't ever get a chance to kind of relax and calm down. And what that causes in the mental health world, we call it like a hyper arousal. You just always on tune, and you always on edge, and your body never gets a chance to kind of decompose and just relax. So I mean, I think it is very true, and it's something that we have to be aware of. And if now being aware of that, then opportunities to talk, to opportunities to have those conversations with our friends and family, because they're going through the same stuff we're going through. We all live in the same community. We're all going through the same stuff. So we have to have those conversations. We have to find the little things, whether it's, listening to music, whether it's watching TV, whether it's reading a book, sunlight, taking a walk. Now we also have to be careful though, what images we're putting into our minds, because we can continue to keep that cycle going and not even pay attention to it by some of the music, by some of the, the movies and things like that. So even as I'm watching, those superhero movies, I'm like, okay, I can't watch 2 or 3 of them in a row, because it's just too much. I mean, even though it's fun and it's colorful, but it's still violence and it's still the things that they're going through. So we just got to be aware of that. And I always tell people, if you know what's going on, then now you have the power to do something about it, even personally, whether it's with the community or things like that. So just recognizing that we are always turned on, so you got to do something to turn yourself off. You got to disconnect a little bit from the world. And I've been, kind of telling my household, even with the COVID stuff, we're not watching the news every day.
Yeah.
We're not going to continue to pump that stuff into because they want you to be on fear and on edge. And some of that stuff is appropriate, but hearing those same messages about, oh, be careful about this, be careful about that, we already know that. So take a step back, catch your breath, figure out your strategy, and then move forward. So, I mean, I think it's really important to understand that secondhand trauma is real, probably more so for people that look like us, and to be aware of that can do wonders in terms of how you take care of yourself.
Thank you so much. You are totally amazing. Thank you for joining us today. Is there anything else that you want to say or add just to kind of wrap things up?
Be blessed, be careful, be safe, pay attention to your surroundings, look out for one another. We're all in this as individuals, but we're in this as a community as well. So.
Man, appreciate you, bro. Love you. Thank you so much.
Love you too.
All right, joining us, we have Mr. Brian Chatfield, community and political organizer. Brian, thank you so much for joining us for True Tuesday. So in light of recent events in our community and our nation, we've faced a lot of kind of trauma. Our teens have witnessed some violent killings. So how are you feeling right now, just in general, as a man, black male, you?
Sure. Thanks for having me and for this opportunity to share. I'm feeling sort of just like multiple generations are feeling, like the young man you interviewed earlier. Feeling very concerned for myself and my community. It's something that's very important. Your previous guest spoke to the mental health side of it, and so I intentionally haven't watched the video. This current one, I haven't watched Central Park 5. I haven't watched a number of the recent videos because I've looked at doing my math. I've been watching these videos since I was 12 years old with Rodney King. So the concerning part is that part of me feel immune to it. I haven't cried this time around, which I've done before. So I know I'm not the only black male that's taking it in that way.
I would definitely agree with you. I've had several conversations with a lot of my African American friends, family members, and a lot of them are just numb, and sometimes their responses for me is disheartening. And I know everybody's in different places, because I know there's a lot of frustration. When I talk to my older uncles, he should have just complied. He shouldn't have ran. And then I explained to my older uncles, okay, well, what about Ahmad, who was simply jogging in Georgia? What's your response? What's your response to that? Or the young lady who simply was riding in the car with her mom, 16, and doing what she's supposed to do. What's your response to that? So oftentimes I think our community is definitely becoming numb and frustrated, and it's what next? And a lot of the teens that I've spoken to, they're angry, and I love it because they feel comfortable. And I mean, not that I love that they cuss. I'm not saying it like that, but their anger is coming out where they feel comfortable enough in a text message to say XYZ, and they're using profanity because their rage is there, and they're seeing the protests, and they want to go downtown and be a part of that and feel like they're speaking and being a part of change. But I guess my question, and I respond to them in a manner of, okay, you need to use wisdom, be safe, talk to your parents. So how can we as teens and young adults speak truth to power in a manner in which our voices can be heard? That's my question. First question for you.
Well, sure. It's been my experience that it's much easier to impact policy when we're engaging our local and national politicians.
Okay.
That's where my ministry lies, and I understand that that's not everyone's ministry.
Right.
I've given a lot of thought about whether we protest or whether we try to affect policy on a governmental level, And I think it's both. I think it has to be a multi-generational effort, from the teens being heard. And there are, and I'm very proud to say that I've noticed locally here over the last few years, there's been many teens that's been engaged in the process and asking the questions, utilizing some platforms like the Bloom Project here in the city, where similar setup to what we're doing, where the teens get to form a panel and address our local leaders and that sort of thing. So we're seeing more of that, and I think we as leaders have to do a better job as dispelling some of the myths around that in teens, because when I worked for the Marion County Election Board, part of my job was to go into high schools and inform and educate teens on the political process. And because the question always, well, why they're not participating. But to my surprise, what I found out that some of these teens are a lot more in the know than you think, and part of the reason why some of them may not be voting is because the people that are on the ballot doesn't look like them, aren't speaking to their issues, and so myself, I take it personally that I need to do a better job, even myself and other local leaders, of educating our youth and making sure that they have the platform to voice their opinions.
Okay, awesome. So I definitely understand where you're speaking about, like, the Bloom Project, and then making sure we're voting and making sure we're aware of people who are on the ballots, and then essentially making sure we have a voice. So I guess, what are some practical things we can do to ensure that our community as a whole has like adequate representation during like community conversation that affect our neighborhood? How can we be a part? How can we join those conversations? What does that look like?
Well, for me, when I was younger, I'm from Gary, Indiana. Grew up was born in 1980, right at the point of the crack epidemic. Then 90s, I think. Growing up at that time, Gary, Indiana was like #1 murder capital, and so for me, at an early age, I saw that there was a problem. I didn't know where to start. I think that's the question becomes like, where do I start? And for me, and I was fortunate enough to have parents that engaged me as well. But the first step that I took was emailing Dr. Vernon Smith. He was a state representative at the time, and still currently is. But I was like in high school at the time, and I just emailed him and told him that, hey, I'm interested in being involved. I want to impact my community, and I continued to do that with different politicians over the years, and ended up getting a lot of guidance, and but more importantly, I got to express and take some of the concerns that me and my peers was having directly to the policymakers.
Wow, that's good. I really like what you said. So essentially, you use your voice and your power to say, hey, I know I may be in high school, whatever, but let me send you this email and let you know how I'm feeling. And I think that's really dynamic. I think a lot of our teens kind of are in this box, and they don't feel like they can speak truth to power. They have the opportunity or the ability to really know. You can call the mayor. You can talk to state and local representatives. Right. Like that's your job. That's your job. Yes. So I get the protest. I get the marching. I get everything that's going on, and I was talking to a friend yesterday kind of just about the situation, and I love because how people bring things full circle, and she was explaining to me, essentially you can't be mad at the people who are posing in front of the police cars, flicking them off or whatever, because they don't know better. And at this point, people are really, really just angry. And if you haven't, so we continued to talk, and it was just like, ding, if you haven't been taught the appropriate steps on how to appropriately speak truth to power, then what do you expect? And so I guess I know we're angry. So I guess my question is there a strategy to protesting and marching, and how do we implement that, and how do we come together as a community to make sure that our protests are beneficial and not detrimental to our community?
Well, sure. Like I said earlier, I think the protests are very important to demonstrate peacefully, because that raises the issue, and that lets our leaders know that we're here, we're engaged, we're concerned. But there's a second step to that process, and that's where, because again, if we're not affecting policy, then it's a struggle. So it's that sustained commitment to the cause. It just can't be when something happens, because we're obviously there's or not so obvious to some that IMPD may have some issues culturally in their department.
Yes.
And so how do we directly impact that? It's education. And again, our leaders, including myself, need to do a better job at engaging young people, because with the lack of education in the process, a lot of these things can get swept under the rug.
Yeah.
So where we would start at is basically understanding and knowing who is my representatives. And I'm a political nerd, so I know everyone's not going to be reading articles every day like I'm doing. But where you can start is simply indy.gov.
Okay.
I would say that 100 times if I can, indy.gov.
Okay.
So that's where you find where you get information on how to contact your mayor, how to contact your city county councilor. All that information is public. The city county council meetings are public. The board that I sit on the business and neighborhood services board.
Awesome.
And those meetings are every month. So that's an opportunity. Even during this COVID situation, there's fortunately for a lot of us now is more of a more online platform with Zoom and things like that, but you still can find out when those meetings are, and if you have a question, then you can type that into the chat, and they're forced to address those things. So it's that from marching to finding out who's that city county councilor in that community, asking or emailing your mayor perhaps, and if you're uncomfortable with how the chief is handling this situation, then that's an opportunity to speak to the mayor about that, because he's the one who hires that person. And so that's what I mean about the education part of it. All these things are connected. Even the board that I sit on, I had to get approval from the city county councilor. And the board that I sit on, it addresses abandoned homes and communities and the blight.
Yeah.
So every once in a while I get an email, and I'm sort of proud when I get that email when there's a concerned citizen that went to indy.gov and found out that this guy that no one else knows, Brian Chatfield, sits on this board, and I've had this abandoned, burnt out building next to my home for years. So they'll directly, contact me and want me to speak to the leaders to address that, and that's holding our politicians accountable. We just can't sit back and allow them to not act on our behalf, and it has to be sustained. I was blessed by today's word about Ruth and her challenges that she had to overcome, but she would not give up. And so that's what we have to do. We can't give up, and it has to be sustained. They have to see us out there marching maybe every Saturday. They, if that's a group of students coming to the city county council meetings, and taking up that opportunity to have public testimony about certain things. And also, and if you don't, if you're not a nerd like me and you want it quick and fast, tune in to 106.7. And there's a young lady, you can look her name up, Ebony Chappelle. She hosts that Sunday morning show that pretty much gives a recap of everything that went on in the week and what we need to know and what statements the mayor made and things like that, so that you can have that information.
All right, Brian, thank you so much for just joining us today. Everything you said was very insightful, and I pray that it was well heard. Family, NewB Nation, young people, I need you to listen. It is okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated, but what you do with your anger will determine the next course of your life. In the word it says, be angry but sin not. So my prayer today is that you understand that it's okay to ask God questions. It's okay to be a little confused, but then also it's okay to figure out, okay, what's going on with my mental health? How can I cope? And then after that, how can I take steps to ensure that my community is influenced and I'm doing my God-given kingdom assignment? Please listen to your parents. Obey the rules, obey the law. Make sure that you're talking to God and seeking God for your assignment. But please, in this season, be safe and use wisdom. Going out there, rah-rah, doing whatever, that's not, and not using wisdom and not being organized, that's not what God is calling us to do. So, this is my prayer for you. Dear gracious and Heavenly Father, I thank you for your young people. I thank you for each and every person watching. I pray that you will just continue to reveal to them their God-given kingdom assignment on this earth. Allow them to know that it's okay to have emotions. Allow them to know that it's okay to be angry and frustrated. But what we do with that anger, allow us to know that that will determine the course in our life. Lord, I pray that you will just bless each and every one of our hearts. Lord, as we're dealing with these things in this secondhand trauma, allow us to know that it's okay to seek help. Allow us to know it's okay to use our coping skills, but allow us to turn to you in times when we don't know the answers. Give us the ability to be able to speak truth to power and use what you've given us to change the nation. Break our heart with the things that really break yours. Allow us to intercede and truly intercede on the behalf of those who don't have a voice. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Know that your voice matters. Use your voice. It needs to be heard and go make a difference. I love y'all. Be blessed. Peace.